welcome back to Sea Moon. I'm Sandy.
And I'm Scott. Thank you so much for joining us on this particular video podcast, which is really all around why we love sailing on our Seawind 1160 Lite with Outboards.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of experience in sailing other kinds of Seawinds. We've certainly been on 1260s and the 1170s, but we want to talk about the 1160 specifically and what we absolutely love, the good, also the ugly, the bad and the ugly, about sailing in our catamaran.
Absolutely. So what are we talking about this episode? Let's
unpack it for you straight away. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well the old chestnut catamaran versus monohull. You know, what we like about this. Now, again, we don't have a lot of experience in cruising monohull, so we're going to talk about the catamaran versus monohull very briefly. We're also going to talk about the layout of this boat, so how it's set up in cockpit-wise and what that means for our enjoyment of sailing the boat. We're going to talk about the sail plan, which is really important, and that's just about what sails we use and when we use them and what we find works for us in that regard.
And then we're going to talk about instruments and what helps us sail. We'll then touch briefly on we'll talk about the outboards, because I think people are really interested about this boat, particularly because we do have the outboards.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't cruise around the world with outboards, is what we hear constantly for a number of different reasons, but we'll unpack that. I think that's...
Yep. And then obviously what could be better about this boat. So what are our pain points and maybe what could be a little bit better?
I mean, we're not sponsored by Seawind. We just love Seawind, and we love our boat. We love our home. So we really want to talk about, well, what could be better in terms of this particular boat, and maybe if you're considering a catamaran, you know, the sort of things that you could make sure are included or changed, or, you know, down the track. But so...
Well, let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk about catamaran versus monohull, because I'm pretty passionate about this one.
Yeah, when Sandy was first coming on board, when I was getting her on board with the whole idea of coming cruising with me on a longer term basis, I put her on a monohull race boat for some people. Very kind skipper offered to bring her on this to give her some experience of what it's like on what we call a tippy boat.
Yeah, which was really, really fun, and, you know, going on whatever tack we were on, having a beer on board was probably the highlight of that day. But I did really at that stage think, I don't want to live my life at 45 degrees or 10 degrees or whatever it was, but I don't want to live my life on an angle. So it really, for me, the catamaran was sold on that day.
Absolutely. I mean, the stability of the platform, especially an anchor, but we are talking about the sailing aspect as opposed to on anchor, so I'll just make sure that we've got that covered. The stability of the larger platform just means that you can honestly leave a cup of coffee on the saloon table while we're going along, and it's quite bouncy in the sea state, and it won't fall off. That doesn't mean that it's always it doesn't mean that it's always perfectly smooth. But cupboards don't bang open. You don't need to lash yourself. Our stovetop doesn't have any sort of restraints around it or gimbals on it, so because it's a stable platform. So I think that was really important from Sandy's perspective and my perspective as well on sailing a catamaran. I love the idea of speed, not necessarily the catamarans are always perceived as faster than monohulls. That's not necessarily true. I understand that. It's all to do with waterline length and other bits and pieces, but pound for pound we are a fast sailing boat, and I love the catamarans for that.
The other thing is that we talked to a few people around the Seawinds, obviously, and other catamarans, and one of the things that, you know, I'm quite safety conscious, so we'll talk a little bit about that in today's episode. But one of the things that we talked about was there was a Seawind that was hit a shipping container that was floating around in the ocean on, I believe it was the Pacific Ocean crossing, and they managed to, is one of the forward hulls, and they managed to actually do a small repair, but it also was in a part of the bulkhead that was watertight, so they were able to get back to safety.
Yeah, and shout out to Jolly Dogs if you're listening. But the legends around the Seawind community, but the the real point of this is that in similar accidents which happen, these guys are experienced sailors doing a east coast of the US to Hawaii, I believe it was, and we've seen lots and lots of well, not lots, but occasional stories of very experienced sailors hitting a whale, hitting a container, just hitting things that they don't even know. A log through Southeast Asia, lots of things that you can hit. Absolutely. And in similar circumstances, a monohull is designed, it's got that big heavy weight on the bottom of it to sink you to the bottom of the ocean. It's trying to pull you down, and if you add water into it, it's going to win. So in circumstances where you'll sink with a monohull, you won't sink with a catamaran, especially the way that this boat is made, which is a GRP, so a plastic fantastic boat, which has got positive buoyancy. So even if we have a big hole in it, she's going to float. Now, she might not float comfortably, but she's going to float. She's not got anything dragging her down to the bottom. And I think from a overall sailing across oceans perspective, that gives you a lot of calm, right?
Well, that was definitely our choice. And I know there's lots of monohull sailors that would completely disagree with us here, but that was our choice. That was one of the biggest things for us. So let's move on and talk about cockpit and the layout of the cockpit, because I think this particular style of cockpit really suits me from a safety perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, Sandy. And I think, a couple of things, that the way that Seawind have thought about these boats, particularly the 1160, is the sailability. And it's really designed for sailors to enjoy sailing the boat, which is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So things like the dual helms, the very, very open cockpit, so there's not a lot of things to bump into when there's heavy seas.
There's no stairs.
So no stairs to go up, covered helm area so that you've got protection. All of those sort of things really, really work well. But I need to talk about the electric winches, Sandy, or I need you to talk about them. So start off with why. This is about our experience. So what do you love about having two, not one, but two electric winches?
One on each side. So in our old catamaran, we had 3 winches, and they were all manual. One was a really big one at the back. But for me, it was around, aging, getting a bit more shoulder pain, and really wanting a little bit more ease of sailing. So that was a really big consideration for me. And one of the conversations that we had when we looked at another boat to purchase was the lady on that boat was actually about to go into shoulder surgery, and that was the reason why they were selling the boat, because she would take 12 to 18 months to recover from that operation. And so at that stage, I was actually experiencing some twinges in my shoulder, and I was like, there's a light bulb moment. I think, when you're young and fit and really healthy, then, obviously winding that winch all the time is okay. But as you age, you might want to have a bit more comfort and luxury. And I think for me, we've got 2 electric and 2 non-electrics, but I think that is something that I would always have on a boat is at least 1 or 2.
Sandy, why don't you let them know what you actually use the electric winches for? What are the lines that you use on those?
So we use it for raising the mainsail, pulling out the head sails.
So the head sail sheets, any halyards that need to go up, but the head sail sheets as well.
Yeah, so furling in, reefing down, all of those things.
Yeah. So anything that she possibly can use, she will use it. Even the head sail furling,
raising the door.
Yeah, raising the trifold door. Absolutely. So a big help to sailing to have those electric winches. They're not as scary as they're only 1 speed, but they're obviously very powerful, and they do a great job for us to help us with the sailability on that shorthanded, just the 2 of us doing it. So the next thing we want to talk about is the cockpit roof, because unlike a lot of Seawinds, we don't have an extended cockpit roof. What that means, it still goes all the way to the back, which is fantastic, especially when big waves are coming over the whole top of the boat. But it's this side area that is not quite as wide as some of the other Seawind boats have.
Maybe some of the newer Seawind boats.
We love you can get an optional piece to put it on it, and then you have a cutaway that you can look at the mainsail. But we love being able to sit up on the side of the boat, like you're sailing along upwind, sitting up on the windward side, and being able to see the sails really, really well. So we love the accessibility. But you know what? When it's raining and when it's rough and when it's cold, it's enough protection to... I'm not saying it's always protection. I've certainly been in squalls where I've been absolutely drenched, but it's great protection for us nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have the cockpit seats here either. So we have these ones out at the back here that I like to call the stadium seating, which gives us really clear view. But we don't actually have helm seats. So we have other places we can sit. So we can, we can sit on the sides. We can...
Reality is we're cruisers. We're not racing and we're not always having to sit at the helm. Like, we don't believe shifts should be sat right in front of the helm, in front of the nav station. You can be a lot more comfortable when you're doing long legs, still seeing out, still seeing plenty of visibility around, but just sitting at the back here, you can see on the stadium seating at the back, you can see it. And the broker actually advised us, because we said, the first thing we're doing is we're going to get helm seats, and he said, I wouldn't do it. They're in the way, they're not really worth it, and we totally concur. I'm either standing at the helm or I'm sitting back here on the cockpit seat. It's
I think the same conversation was said about having a table here as well. Just keep it nice, open and clear, nothing to trip over. We've got some really good grab lines, so this grab line goes all the way to the back. We've got, it's a really easy, even if we're in that turbulent sea like we were, let's say the Red Sea, we've got really great lock-in points or handhold points.
Yeah, and you absolutely need them, especially on a 38-foot catamaran, which we'll get to. But she can be quite shaky at times. You need these handholds. You feel like you're in a monkey bar sometimes. Always have one hand for the boat, and there's plenty of handholds around here for that. The other thing is access to the motors. So especially when we were sailing up through Southeast Asia, there's just so much rubbish in the water, right? And it's a lot of current, and so all the rubbish continues to wash through into the waterways, and it's inevitable you'll get hung up on some sort of plastic or some sort of line.
And in fact we did. So we were coming through the Malacca Strait, and it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. You were asleep, I was on shift, a couple of hours into my shift, and I heard we only run with one motor. So the other one is in the up position, and I heard the motor shift. There was something different about it. So I had a quick look, and I knew there was something wrong. So I turned the motor off, put the other motor down, turned the other motor off, and brought it up. And there was a great big bit of plastic on it. So it had wrapped itself around. It was really that really thick white or transparent plastic that you would find on a pallet. And that had completely wrapped around the prop. So you did come up at that stage, and with shining a torch down, we were able to get it off just using the boat hook. So
we can access the propellers from inside of the cockpit, and I think that is, it doesn't always work, but most of the time, if we need to clear something off the prop, we can just bring the motor up and access it from within the cockpit. And to us, that is absolute gold. It means you can stay out of the water, especially at night, which is kind of a scary thing.
Yeah.
One of the things, in terms of the design of the sheets and the lines, they're all brought back to the cockpit. There's no reason. We don't have a winch on the mast, which is a deliberate thought from Seawind, not to have to go to the mast to put up any halyards or do any sort of reefing. And in big seas, that's a good thing. You need to be able to access all the lines from the very safe and secure cockpit, right?
Absolutely. And I think if you're planning and intending on doing lots of night passages, and you are going to be, one person's on watch and one person's asleep, if you do need to do something with the sail, if you need to tack, or if you need to, even put in a reef, sometimes we can do that single-handedly depending on the conditions. So, or shaking out a reef more likely. Putting one in, we generally do that together, but shaking out one is lighter wind, so we do that by ourselves. But it does, having the ability to do that from the cockpit by yourself in the middle of the night, gives that other person some time to sleep. So I think it's a really good idea for us.
What Sandy's trying to say is we definitely have a rule that we don't go, when there's only one person on watch, we don't go forward. We don't come out of the cockpit, because it's just, even though we've got harnesses and jack lines, all that sort of stuff, it's just too risky. So we can control everything from the safety of the cockpit, and that's the way that we leave it, and that's the way that we love it.
And the cockpit is a step down cockpit, so you're actually at the lowest point in the cockpit. There's stairs up and obviously, you know, all the other mouldings, so you're actually really safe and secure in this area.
Yeah.
And then we have the obviously the large lifelines as well. So we have the charter version lifeline, so
they're higher than normal lifelines would be, and it does give you that feeling of security when you are going up there, because as we were taught by our man overboard safety trainer Gordo, if you're listening, shout out to Gordo. The best thing to do to protect a man overboard is to not go overboard. So, you know, high lifelines and jack lines and harnesses are very important when you're cruising oceans, but a better thing to do is just to have that security of the high lifelines, and I think that is really, really important. And also, I mean, we've been through some rough weather you know, gentlemen don't go to wind, they say, which means that we're trying to go downwind as much as possible, which means the weather's coming from behind us. Yeah. So often, you know, we've got the ability to close our trifold door right off and keep the bad weather out here, and we can be safely, comfortably inside, steering, controlling the boat from completely inside the cockpit, which is just really, really nice and easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that I really love about this boat is that at night, you know, and I have had some instances where at night I've been sitting inside and I can see clearly outside those big picture windows. I've got the B&G turned around so I can see the navionics, and we're all going well. And I've come outside because there's been a wind shift, and I've seen the most ginormous wave at the back of me, and I really haven't realised the sea state that we've been in. So I've gone down and I've tapped Scott on the shoulder or on the foot and said, "Can you come up and help me? And you know, I need to do something with the sails." And so he's come up on board. But sometimes you don't realise, you know, exactly what's happening out here, because you're not out here in the elements, you're inside. So as a sailor that's fairly new into sailing, I think that gave me great comfort to do those night watches and gave me a bit of more confidence as well. Yeah,
I mean, just the ability to close off the outside world just makes you feel better in the bigger seas. I'm not saying you're not in control, because you absolutely are. It's just the boat really looks after us, and we love that about the Seawinds as well. The dual helms is something I wanted to talk about. I think, you know, sometimes you think, well, I don't really need dual helms, especially because the autopilot's doing most of the work. But having them is fantastic from a visibility perspective, especially if you're going upwind, because you don't really have, you know, you might want to be hard on the wind. You want to see the telltales on the Genoa, and, you know, being on the windward side really helps that. I would say we try not to go upwind too much. Yesterday we went upwind, and I certainly crossed a number of times to the second helm. When we're tacking, we like to do that. So I like to do the helm and release the Genoa while Sandy pulls on the lazy side. So that really works. The dual helms are great. It's also built-in obsolescence. So, or sorry, if you've got a problem with one of the rudders, you can disconnect that and just steer off the one rudder. And I think from a safety perspective, that's really fantastic. We haven't had to do that, which is fantastic, but dual helms really, really, we find amazing.
And I think you really had fun, you know, in Sydney Harbour.
Yeah.
tacking downwind or upwind there. Yeah, you had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
running across the cockpit.
Absolutely. Well, should we talk about sail plans, Sandy?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that, you know, we've had some questions after our first video or podcast. What sort of sails do we have?
Yeah, absolutely. So what came with the boat was a setup that had a screecher on a bowsprit that was permanently up, and then we have a Genoa that's led back to special tracks on the Genoa on the sides, and we have a main. The main's got 3 reefing points, and we've got 3 lines for those reefing points. That's not standard, but it was set up again for shorthanding, and we certainly have the ability to run those lines back nice and easily. Now, we don't like the Screecher. We've had some problems with it unfurling on us, unfortunately. So we haven't used that. We also I felt coming from a racing background that we needed an asymmetric spinnaker. So we have an asim for it, and we love using that. We don't get to use it as often as we would like because there's not that many. There's a lot of wind in Greece, and we haven't really needed to have it. But where we've used it, we just love using the asim. We're getting more. We're moving up into a part of the world that has less wind. So we are getting the Screecher up and running again. So and we will be using that in lighter winds rather than using the iron sail, which is the motors. The sail itself is not. There's a big trend for mainsails and genoas and jibs to be the black sails, the Mylar, Kevlar type of arrangements. This one isn't. This is a very heavy duty cruising laminate sail. Built for distance, not necessarily. Doesn't look that pretty anymore, but every time we go to a sail maker, we say, hey, what do you think about our main? And they say, it's perfect. So this is the main, it's probably the base option for Seawinds, but we highly recommend it if you're planning on doing a lot of miles. It's probably done 12,000 miles now.
Just what we've done is 12,000 miles. So
yeah, absolutely. So it would have done more than that. And it's sail, you know, we do the odd repair on it in terms of where it rubs through on the shrouds, and where's some, you know, batten pocket issues. But apart from that, she's in great shape. Yeah. So really, whereas if we were with one of the more expensive black sails that everyone seems popular to get, they look better, but you know, we've heard they just don't last. They won't go the distance the same as these sails. So both of our sails are very heavy duty cruising sails, the Genoa and the main. Now we do have a self-tacking jib, which we used in Sydney Harbour and love that. Self-tacking is amazing for the jib. We just find when we're cruising, it's mostly downwind and it's just not big enough to push us fast enough downwind. So we like to have the big Genoa, and a lot of times we're going dead downwind and we'll just wing on wing the thing without poling it out. I'll probably set up some sort of extra line system to keep it out there, but at the moment, you know, we're doing 150 apparent or more. She'll sit out there in the gull wing position and push us along nicely. So that's what we found works for us really well.
Yeah. So we've got the main with 3 reefing points. You've got a self-tacking jib. We've got a Genoa, Jenny. We love Jenny. We've talked about the asymmetrical Screecher. And the other thing, we do have a storm jib. We've put it up, well, we tested it in Sydney Harbour, but in all honesty, we will never ever use it. It's down in our sail locker.
I don't think, and this could be a controversial subject, because there's a lot of people think you've got to have the safety gear. We do have a storm jib. From its shape and the way that it velcros on to the front, I can't see that it would be any more advantageous for us than just putting a little piece of the Genoa out. Yeah. So, which is what we've always done in a larger storm. We've just put a Genoa, we've never been in a storm that would have required a storm jib, but we'll just put a little bit of Genoa out, and I think it's a lot more viable option to do that. I know Tom Carnleaf talks about, it's really your main you need to have. In our third reefing position for the main with a little bit of Genoa, I think will put us through any kind of weather where we still need to have steerage and where we've got any sails at all. So,
great.
Yeah, we feel confident in that, but we do have the storm jib in case we do need to use it.
If you had your time again, Scott, would there be any other sail that you would want? Like, you know, we've still got 2/3 of the world to go. Is there any other little surprises that you might say, hey, Sandy, let's get a ... for...
I'd love a parasailer, Sandy. Thanks for asking. No, Christmas is coming up and so is my birthday. I think a parasailer would be amazing. We don't run downwind without the main up. I think a parasailer might allow us to do that. It's not a masthead halyard, so a parasailer might just vent some gusts a bit better and a bit more stable on the boat. I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but I would say a parasailer would be wonderful. That's just your spinnaker, more of a symmetrical spinnaker with a cutout on it that allows venting so that there's not so much pressure going when you hit the bottom of a wave. I think that would be fantastic for maybe the Atlantic or definitely the Pacific crossing when that comes up in our future. But realistically, I think we're pretty good with the sail that we've got, the sail plan that we've got for sure.
Great. Save that money. So let's talk about instruments, because we do have a few things that help us and support us in sailing. So can you talk about those, Scott? Because I think you're closer
absolutely.
to me.
And this is probably a standard setup on Seawinds, but we have the B&G chart plotter. We use the Zeus 3. Now there's obviously, I think, 2 or 3 more higher levels of the B&G now, but we love the B&G Zeus 3.
And that's set up on our port side?
Yeah. I mean, we've found when we were doing the Indian Ocean crossing, it cut out a couple of times, probably because it gets so hot with the sun beating on it. There's not a lot of airflow where when we were doing that sort of crossing, and a lot of sun, a lot of heat. And also, it might not have as much internal memory. Now, I think the later versions have been designed to do that. So if I wanted to upgrade, I would stay with B&G, really enjoying P. And we use C maps on that. I still think they're really, really good. We can get multi-layers, all sorts of stuff. I know, again, it's a controversial topic with charts, but we use C maps. And we really like it. We think they're fantastic.
Great. So let's talk about our Cortex Vespa, because we've had some challenges with that.
So this is probably the best, the world-class type of VHF AIS system that you can get, which is the Cortex Vespa. That Garmin, it used to be a New Zealand company, Garmin bought it. And we don't think they're supporting it properly. So we've had some problems which were internal software issues. We've kind of solved them now, we believe, but it's because we got a new unit. So
we've got 2 new units.
We've got a couple of new units. Yeah, this one seems to have, touch wood, worked well. But it'll do our AIS, so it's got a built-in splitter, so it doesn't need to have an external splitter. We don't need 2 aerials. AIS Class B, so it's very good for our cruising. We can see everything on our chart plotter. It's all fed into the NMEA system. It's using a lot of data. I love there's a plotter on it, so that you can, even though you've got your AIS on your Zeus, on the B&G chart plotter, so you can see when there might be a ship or another boat that might intersect you too close. If you go to your plotter on your Cortex Vespa, it means you can see whether it's going to cross in front of you or behind you. And you can also say, well, what if I go 5 degrees to starboard? And you can see the impact that's going to have on it real time. So I love that. That's been really, really handy. I do like the plotter.
And we also use the anchor alarm on that as well. Yeah,
the anchor alarm is, I think, best in class again. So, and we use it that way. We also put a pin on our B&G chart plotter where we drop the anchor, because that helps it visually see it. But from an anchor alarm perspective, the built-in anchor alarm on the Cortex Vespa is really, really good. So we highly recommend that. It's good. I mean, it's not easy to talk on the radio. I just think, they've built something that looks really sleek and modern, but to actually push the button to talk on it, you end up, my big hands end up turning it off or changing screens, and it gets a bit more difficult to know whether you've actually pressed the send button. So I would love an old school big toggle, but if you get over that, it's a great unit, right?
It is a great unit. And as I said, this is like the 3rd unit that we've now had. We did have it replaced in Phuket, and we had it replaced when we first came to Greece as well. Just do some technical issues with it.
Thank you, Garmin, for at least coming to the party.
Yeah, absolutely. Seawind and Garmin helped us out with that, and even though it is 4 years old, they were really helpful and helped us replace those with no charge. So well done, and thank you. The other things that I use on a daily basis, I do the anchoring from up here, so Scott's up the front when we're doing the anchoring. So I have an anchor display down at the helm station that I can see, what length of chain's going out.
Now we're running a newer Cougar windlass. I know Seawind's more latest versions have gone to the Maxwell, but we do like our Cougar, our Muir Cougar. So we've got a Muir remote system anyway that allows us to. I can't say that our windlass has been performing faultlessly since we've got here to Greece, but it works really well from the helm situation to be able to lower the anchor and raise the anchor from the helm. I think that's definitely important. And
for the motors, we also have the controls for the motors. So we have the electric up-down switches.
Yeah, so the tilt,
at the helm.
The tilts, the electric starts on all at the helm station, on the port helm station, not dual. And we also have so the throttle cables and the gear select levers. That's all manual cable, so it's not fly-by-wire. Sometimes that makes it a little bit clunkier, but it does feel like it's you have complete control over those outboards.
You also have a compass on each side?
Yeah, mandatory to have from a safety perspective to have a compass on each side. Just don't use them, but good to know they're there.
Yeah.
And we have some Triton instruments on. We've got one Triton instrument on our starboard side. So if you're racing or you were just going upwind in a crowded environment, you can see. I have that on the wind plot, so it's good to see where you are, where you were heading. And on the other side, we have the auto helm controller, and we have two Triton displays. One we have on the autopilot, and one we have on that wind plot again. So very handy instrumentation at the port helm, and also what you need in the starboard helm.
And so we've just got motor controls on the port helm. We don't have the same motor controls on the starboard helm. Again, that's an option.
No,
I understand.
And I know everyone says with dual helms, it's really easy to dock. If you're coming in on the starboard side, you can use the starboard helm. But I like to say, if you don't have engine controls on there, then that's not a lot of use to you. So, there's plenty of visibility to the start. We're only a small boat, 38 foot, so there's plenty of visibility on this boat when you're standing on the engine hatch to see the whole boat. You don't need to go to that starboard side for docking, so everything's at that port control there. Works really, really well for us.
Absolutely.
And I guess the outboards are, from a sailability perspective, when we're talking about, why we love sailing our Seawind, so the best thing is when we're not using the outboards, but that feeling when those outboards lift up out of the water is just, and all you're hearing is the boat going through the water. It's just majestic, and we just really, really love that.
Yeah, turning off those motors is actually the best part of our day, and I think we need to talk about the outboards quite a bit here because people are really interested in your thoughts about the outboards.
Sure. And there's some things about the outboards. They use a lot more fuel than a diesel engine. So we work on an average of 5 litres per hour that are going through.
So it's petrol, not diesel?
Yes, it's petrol, not diesel. So petrols can be a little bit more expensive than diesel, and we're using probably about 5 times as much fuel, maybe 4 times as much fuel as an equivalent boat with inboards in. The payoff for that is that we're much lighter than a boat with inboard diesels. It costs a lot less to replace an outboard engine than it does to replace a diesel and sail drive. So we do have that ability to upgrade our engines or change them over. So we've just got replacement outboards. I'm not sure they needed it, but we had an opportunity and we thought, well, why not? This will last us for another 3 or 4 years for getting practically new outboard engines. And so we know what's involved, and whilst it's not simple plug and play, there's a little bit more to unplugging and plugging back in. For a skilled mechanic, it's pretty easy to do both engines in half a day. So it's an easy process compared to trying to get a diesel engine out of a boat, which is a lot more complex. We understand. And you don't need to worry about things like folding props. On our first boat, Tenacity, it had two fixed props on the sail drives to start with, and we changed them over. Very helpful for the new owner. Shout out if you're listening, Ben. So we changed them over to folding props, and it made a 1.5 knot difference in speed. Well, probably 2 knot difference between. So maybe a 1/2 knot, maybe a knot bigger by having the whole engine out of the water. So we really enjoyed the sailing and the speed and the lightweight of the motors, which is fantastic. Really,
and I think
enjoyed
this boat's around 7 tonne.
Yeah,
So
probably 7 tonne loaded. She's probably closer to 6 unloaded and 7 tonne with all of us on board. So. Which is good. I mean, we have a big heavy dinghy and big solar arch and 100 metres of chain, so we know we're not at the, and fuel, we've often got 350 litres, and we've often got 300 or 400 litres of water on board, so we know we're not the lightest, but we think they're the essential things to spend weight on, and we save weight on other areas of the boat, which means that she sails really well.
Yeah. So would you change anything about the outboards? Would you rather diesels? I guess that's the biggest question.
Yeah, I mean, there's some if we talk about the downsides of having outboards, I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, they're difficult to service. They fit in a little slot with a nice little dedicated hatch, but there's not a lot of room in there. So even to check the oil, it's difficult to get your hand right under to find that oil plug. I remember the first time I did that, I couldn't get it back in. And I had to ring the mechanic and say, help, I can't get the plug back in. It's a finicky thing that you've got to just sort of understand. But if you can see it, you understand it. But you can't see it. You're always working blind around the back of the motor. So it is difficult to do it. Not impossible, but it's not a greatest environment to be able to do things like that. The previous owner had set this boat up with a freshwater flush system, which is pretty unbelievable when you think about it. So it had a little tap on both sides that when you opened it up, it took water from our freshwater system using our freshwater pump and pumped that through the motor. Now, the motor had to be at an up angle, so it wasn't, because there's no point pumping water through when it was down into the salt water. So when it was out of the water, it was at a 45-degree angle, so it wasn't quite getting all of the motor. So that was a downside to that. Also, the fittings leaked. And if you know about, when we've got a freshwater pump on our boat, any fitting that's leaking will cause the pump to go off regularly. So we had to end up taking those off, those freshwater pumps. So I would like to redesign that system so that we did have the ability to freshwater flush. But at the moment, we're just, we use them a lot, so they don't have time to get salt built up in them too badly. The big thing I think that I wasn't aware of when I was looking at the difference between inboards and outboards is realistically we need to haul out every 100 hours, let's say once a year, we've got to haul out. We've got copper coat on this boat, so we don't need to haul out for the bottom purposes. We really just need to haul out to change that gear oil out. So it can be in the sling type of haul out. If you're in Australia or someplace with big tides, you just dry her out, right? And then you can change the gear oil out. You can even drop a leg. You've got time to do that, to check the seals and do the impeller and all of that sort of service yourself. We find we have to haul out to do that stuff. We know of one guy in the US, if you're listening, big shout out, that it's designed a system that you can actually do it whilst you're in the water. But kudos to him, because I think that looks, you rig up a little hammock underneath. We're thinking it might be easier just to work out to haul out. But that can be expensive. You have to do that every year. So you do have to do that for the annual service that you're going to need as a minimum on these outboards. So you are going to need to do that. Whereas with the inboards, you can do all that stuff from in the water. And I think most of it, I think that's really, really good.
And because of where they sit in that harsh water environment. So why it's a cavity. So there is some splash that comes up on those.
Yeah, they live in a very salty, moist environment and you don't have access always to, I know if you're on an outboard and you're in an outboard little tender boat or whatever, you can always wash the thing down when you finish sailing and it'll be in the salt water for the day. We can't really do that. So we don't have that water to spare. So it does get a lot of salt caked up on it. We try our best to keep them nice and clean, but inevitably it's a harsh environment. We just have to accept that.
That's quite unique to us as well, because we are cruising and in remote places. if you were going back to a dock every night or, you know, once a week, you could do that quite easily in a marina. So when we are in a marina, we tend to give it a little bit more care because we've got a little bit more water. But you could do that.
I think the other thing to note too, Sandy, is that these outboards, the way they're positioned, they're inside of the hulls, which means we don't get quite the advantage of them being in front of the rudder. So most sailing catamarans with inboards have the propeller that flows water across the rudder, which means that you can, at low speeds, at low revs, you can still turn the rudder and move the boat. Because we're inboard of the rudder, it just means that we have to be a lot more aggressive on the reverse and forwards type of situation. We think we're really good at it now, so at being able to manoeuvre this boat, you know, turn her on a dime with our outboards that are inboard. But you do need to have a fair bit of forwards momentum in order for the rudders to start working, and you know, it's just something that we've had to get used to. You steer with the motors, the forwards and back, and then when you've got enough forward momentum, then the rudders kick over. So
that's definitely been something that I've had to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely something to bear in mind when you're looking at the difference between outboards and the inboard ones as well. I think one of the, you know, and we were advised of this early on when we were thinking about buying this boat with outboards, the cavitation effect of in the sea, because our props are just not as deep as, even with the tilt on them and where they're situated, and they're long legged, so they're not your normal outboard. They've got a longer leg on them than normal, but they're not as deep as inboard propellers would be on your sail drives or your shaft drives. And that just means that they are prone in certain sea states to cavitation. They'll lift out of the water, they'll get too close to the surface, and you get this type of noise. Something that we live with. And we know the worst situation for us is when there's low winds and, you know, at the end of a big blow, but the very confused sea state means that she's not going to be able to push through the water very fast with our outboard engines because she just doesn't get the bite that she needs to.
So sea state's something that, you know, if we could talk about the bridge deck, because I guess most catamarans have what we call is a slap. So let's talk about that. Yeah,
I've certainly seen some YouTube videos saying that certain catamarans are more prone to the big slap that happens with the waves from underneath, and that can be very, very violent. So you know, things can jump off the table. I think I've said in a previous time. So we do have I wouldn't say the highest of bridge decks for a 38-foot boat. And our bridge deck, we have our water pod is there to try and break up the waves, but certain sea states, you're going to get some sort of slap.
Absolutely.
So you just try to, you either, realistically, if we're crossing oceans or going from A to B as cruisers, we have to just weather that. Like if you could come up 10 degrees, you might ease that, but that might add hours and hours to your trip. So we know it's a trade-off, and we'll just weather it. It never gets so bad that you think, oh my God, this is just terrible. But I know one time in the Indian Ocean, it was bad, and there's nothing we could really do
about it. I mean, we generally do sleep when we're doing a large ocean passage. We generally do sleep in our own bed, so you know, whoever's not on watch will go down to our cabin and sleep down there. So it's not that bad that you can't sleep. There's been a couple of nights that it has, and the Indian Ocean, there was, I think, one night there and maybe a night or two in the Red Sea, those hairy nights after we came out of Sudan, that you really wanted to sleep upstairs rather than downstairs. Just upstairs felt a little bit more comfortable and a little bit less noisy.
It does, and to that effect, I think, you know, it'd be great to have a little bit more bridge deck clearance. I think Seawind's gone exactly the same bridge deck clearance on their later models, so clearly they don't see it as an issue, and I don't either. It's not a, you know, it'd be great to have more bridge deck clearance, but that would push the whole boat up, and that we love the fact that she's like a sleek sports car. She's low, she's got low windage. We get very, very little leeway with this boat. So we're not pushed sideways ever, except if there's a big current going on the side. We can go upwind and not fall off at all, which is unique to catamarans with our mini keels. We don't have dagger boards, we have the mini keels, and we just think that performs amazingly. So I wouldn't want to change it. I think it's a trade-off we would be willing to take for absolute sure. So yeah.
Anything else you wanted to cover today?
Well, I think that's it. I think, we just wanted to give our experience of the reasons behind why we love sailing our Seawind 1160 Lite with outboards, so that some of you can understand, what our thinking is behind it. We told you before in previous podcasts why we selected this boat. This is our experience on it, and to be honest, I think she's amazing. In the larger wind situation we've been in Greece last season, I think she's performed faultlessly. In the lighter winds that we'll probably have this season, we're looking forward to the Screecher pushing us as well. But she's really been performing well.
We are at the bottom of the Peloponnese in Greece at the moment, and we are just about to head up to Croatia. So that's the area that we'll be sailing in this season, this Mediterranean summer season. So hopefully we can come back and talk about the experience there. But that's what we've experienced, I guess, in the last couple of years on this boat, why we've cruised from Australia to Greece. And that could be different, obviously, for the next legs. Yeah,
absolutely. So stay tuned for lots of information coming up from these sessions. We hope you're enjoying them. If you do enjoy them, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We really appreciate that. And subscribe and hit the notification bell so that we're going to try and drop one of these. We think they're evergreen episodes, and we try to add photos in and videos to make them more interesting than just two talking heads. We hope you appreciate that. But we love your comments, we love your questions. Please keep them coming, because and we get back to every single person that responds to us. So please feel free to do that. And thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, thanks very much. Bye bye.